All right. Lastly, let's just check in on this Judge Napolitano because obviously there was, and I'm still winding my way through the Mueller report. It is quite clear. There's a couple of things about the Mueller thing because obviously there was we had a little contention here, and we're going to have Marcy Wheeler on sometime in the coming week or two, as soon as we just work the scheduling out to go over what we now know is in the Mueller report. And there's a couple of things clear. Obviously, nothing has changed in terms of the way that some elements of the media, some elements of the Democratic Party, played this, at least in terms of the Mueller investigation. We still don't know what's in the intelligence investigation. And I suspect we're going to know more. The bar, obviously, from an intelligence accusation is lower than it is from a criminal investigation. But there was a couple of things that were quite clear in the wake of the Mueller report. One is that there was evidence of collusion, but not enough to substantiate a conviction. There was, and by collusion, because there is no criminal definition of collusion, which we have also, been aware of for a long time. The only thing that could have been charged would have been if the Trump campaign actively worked with Russian government officials to do what Russian government officials did in the campaign. So if they here's a computer that you could use to go and hack into Florida's election system.
Really? Thank you, bro.
Love it.
Love it. Computers.
Or you guys should target these Facebook groups. That would have been necessary to prove based upon the conspiracy charges. What clearly did happen, according to the Mueller report, is that the campaign was aware of what the Russians were doing. And the Russians were aware that the campaign wanted them to and were willing to do stuff. And it was just one of those things where it's like two people realize they have aligned incentives. And we don't need to do anything. We just have the guy go out and say, keep doing it, Russia. If you got those 30,000 emails, that would be good. And Russia can say, we like, what the Trumps...
Making deals.
Right. We making deals. This is more just like the type of corruption that we rail against every single day. Like Joe Biden going to a Comcast, lobbyist. I mean, it's basically that kind of stuff. One would think that as the head of a presidential campaign, you would say hey, you're a foreign government. You really shouldn't be doing this, as opposed to keep doing it. So the obstruction charge, we also know that Mueller explicitly said, we can't charge anything. We can't charge the president with anything because of the DOJ Office of Legal Counsel. So there is a constitutional process to deal with these things. What is that constitutional process? Well, go read the Constitution. It's called impeachment. It's called Congress to look at it. So Bill Barr did subvert what Mueller wanted to have happen and anticipated would happen, which would be that the obstruction charges would go to Congress. There's obviously a lot more in the report, but those are the big takeaways in terms of those two issues. The other, in terms of the critiques, and I'm looking back to the, I wouldn't call what happened with Michael Tracy in any way enlightening, other than his, he was going to spend 10 minutes to tell me that he was agnostic about the starting of this investigation that he thinks is actually like World War III starting now. But if it was the case that Donald Trump was specifically acting more, belligerent towards Russia than necessary because of this pressure, because he was reacting to the pressure from the Mueller investigation, which he must have known would completely exonerate him because he knew that he didn't do anything, then I guess we would see, broader overtures or more peace now would be breaking out now that the public has exonerated him or in some way. The idea that this was a gift to Donald Trump, that Democrats and the news media gave Donald Trump an electoral gift, is not borne out by any of the data. Donald Trump's favorability rating is about as low as it's been. The number of people who would vote against him is about as high as it's been. The number of people thinks he was lying about Russia and that this report makes him look bad is about as high as it could be. The idea that this was a gift to Donald Trump, if that's one of your talking points as to why there should have been nothing but skepticism around this investigation, I'm sorry, it just doesn't bear out. This investigation has uncovered a tremendous amount of corruption. This investigation would not have done so, likely, were it not for the premise in which it was launched. There wouldn't have been a special prosecutor. So it's uncovered a tremendous amount of corruption. It's also continuing to do so. There are many other investigations that were thrown out, that were basically placed out of this primary investigation. So if this investigation did not have happened, you would not have found these other investigations. You would not have had these other ongoing investigations. Obviously, there were excesses in the media coverage, but largely it seems to me that, and I don't think those critiques are invalid, but it really is like obsessing over the graphics and the music used for the invasion of the Iraq War that the media is using. Yeah, disgusting, wrong, shouldn't happen, part of a bigger problem, a societal disease, et cetera, et cetera. But there was also the war was also, highly problematic. And if you start to look into the substance of this stuff, I think it was always, sort of ridiculous to assume that the Trump campaign had the facility to help Russia in their involvement in the campaign, whether you think it had any material impact or not. I guess conceivably, we still don't know why the polling data was given to a guy with connections to the Russian government. We'll never know because Manafort lied about that. And we don't know why it was necessary for Manafort to lie and pretend like he was, working with the government when in fact he was feeding information to the Trump administration. We just don't know. But I don't know. And if you don't believe me, why not believe a guy who would be extremely skeptical as to whether there was law breaking that took place? And whether you can actually be charged with obstruction if you can't prove an underlying crime.
So when the president asked his former advisor and my former colleague at Fox, K.T. McFarland, to write an untruthful letter to the file knowing the government would subpoena it, that's obstruction of justice. When the president asked Corey Lewandowski, his former campaign manager, to get Mueller fired, that's obstruction of justice. When the president asked his then White House counsel to get Mueller fired and then lie about it, that's obstruction of justice. When he asked Don McGahn to go back to the special counsel and change his testimony, that's obstruction of justice. When he dangled a pardon in front of Michael Cohen in order to keep Cohen from testifying against him, that's obstruction of justice. Why not charge him? Because the Attorney General of the United States would have blocked such a charge. Because the Attorney General of the United States is of the view that obstruction of justice can only occur if you're interfering with a criminal investigation of yourself. But that's not what the obstruction statute says. And that's not what law enforcement believes, and that's not what prosecutors do. Prosecutors prosecute people who interfere with government functions. And that's what the president did by obstruction. Where's this going to end? We don't know. But I'm disappointed in the behavior of the president. His job is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, to uphold and to enforce federal law, not to violate it. If he had ordered his aides to violate federal law, to save a human life, or to preserve human freedom, he would at least have a moral defense to his behavior. But ordering them to break federal law to save him from the consequences of his own behavior, that is immoral, that is criminal, that is defenseless, and that is condemnable.
Now, that is Democratic Congressman. No, wait a second. I'm sorry. That is
Jerry
MSNBC
Nadler?
host. No, wait a second. No, that is Judge Napolitano on Fox News. And in fact, they wouldn't even let him shoot that in the building, apparently. They had to shoot it out in the street on 6th Avenue.
You had to grab the intern.
I think I know who I want to shoot on Fifth
And look,
Avenue.
Mueller anticipated Congress looking at these questions of obstruction. And Bill Barr, who was picked because he did a 19-page memo describing why obstruction could not exist in this context without even knowing the facts. As a matter of law, it can't exist. Because if it's the case, and now Trump is refusing to let any of his people testify in front of Congress, the argument is basically, if Mueller was not allowed to give this to Congress, and the Justice Department says you cannot indict a sitting president, basically what we have is a situation where there is zero legal accountability for a sitting president. Nobody has ever asserted that. Well, maybe Nixon, but nobody has ever asserted this in their right mind, has ever asserted this. And by preventing Congress from looking specifically at that obstruction case, that is the subtext of the argument. Now, Congress is going to hopefully continue to investigate. And I hope we get proceedings. I mean, look, impeachment is a process, right? Do I think they should have an impeachment vote anytime soon? No. And I think they should continue and investigate, because let the American public see really have a sense of what's going on. And see if they come around on impeachment, because it's a political process. And at the very least, holding them to account by investigating, making this stuff public. Personally, I am very much in favor of impeach the guy once he's out of office in 2020, 2021. I would feel much more comfortable about saving the impeachment hearings for then. But that's a different issue.